Useless people who just give birth to daughters are not needed in this house.
My mother-in-law had always disliked me, repeatedly subjecting me to harassment. I had grown tired of her antics, but my father-in-law, my husband, and my daughter were always on my side. She was the only source of trouble. If only I could somehow deal with this person, my everyday life would become enjoyable. And so life went on while thinking these things until that day. My mother-in-law went on a trip to the hot springs, and the day after I went to pick her up.
Huh? You're already out? Even though I hit the prefab's key, it seems like luck was on your side. I thought you'd turn into a mummy overnight.
Wait a moment. Locked in the prefab? What on earth happened? What's with this prefab? I haven't been inside it for a week.
Huh? Then who did I lock in there yesterday?
We hurried back home only to find an unexpected person collapsed inside the prefab. They were rushed to the hospital immediately, and when we confronted my mother-in-law at the hospital, she turned pale and collapsed in shock. I got married to my husband 5 years ago, and now we have a 4-year-old daughter. I met my husband due to work-related reasons. We had shared hobbies and our personalities matched well, so we started dating quickly. After a year of dating, we got married and we were leading a truly happy life. In our first year of marriage, we were blessed with a child, and since my husband was busy with work at the time, my mother-in-law offered to actively support me, which led to us living in my in-laws' house. Of course, there was also a desire for support during my pregnancy, but both of us are currently living off our savings, and my husband, who was concerned about both of us, seemed to want us to live together. With that, life in my in-laws' house began, and until our child was born, we were genuinely enjoying our life, but as soon as our daughter was born, only my mother-in-law's attitude began to change.
The baby has been crying all night since yesterday. Can't you do something about it? It's so stressful.
I'm sorry. Can you hear it even on the second floor?
Of course I can. Having to hear that noise every day, I feel like I'm getting neurotic. A girl's high-pitched voice is really annoying. Why don't you stuff some tissue in her mouth and shut her up?
My mother-in-law was always forthright with everyone, but I never expected to receive complaints about the baby's crying to this extent. This likely stemmed from the fact that the baby was a girl. My father-in-law had been running a company since a young age, and before I met my husband, he was already the heir to become the next president. So, my mother-in-law seemed to desire a male heir, but well, it's not like having a girl is a bad thing, and she's a precious granddaughter nonetheless. Or so I thought, but my mother-in-law didn't understand at all. I'm sorry that she said such terrible things. Let me apologize on behalf of my wife. Baby's cries are proof that the child is healthy. She's become a bit impatient with age, it seems. I'll talk to her too. Please don't take it too hard. It's alright. It's not your fault, Jack. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are known in the neighborhood as a loving couple, and my father-in-law defended me, so I couldn't truly blame my mother-in-law. Well, I should just shrug it off, I thought, while hoping somehow the situation with my mother-in-law could change. I thought about it every day. Years passed, and now my daughter is 4 years old. Truly, she's been untouched by injuries or illnesses, and seeing my daughter grow up healthy, like a boy, was really delightful, and every day was happy. Well, the harassment from my mother-in-law persisted as usual, and I was troubled by her insincere words and actions, but the happiness I felt taking care of my daughter outweighed it. However, since my daughter started going to kindergarten, my mother-in-law's attitude escalated rapidly.
Could you clean the yard? Weeds have grown quite a bit.
Right now, I have to go to the city office. Besides, it's scorching hot. Can I do it after the sun sets?
What? Can't you hear what I'm saying? You're just a daughter-in-law. Who do you think you are?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that.
Goodness, stop fooling around and start cleaning the yard already.
Well, the weeds weren't growing as much as my mother-in-law claimed, and it should have been pretty low on the priority list. In the scorching heat, she must just want to make things difficult for me. Until now, I could endure it because of my daughter's presence, but gradually, I might not be able to handle my mother-in-law's escalating harassment. I started thinking like that from this moment onwards. However, since we had already decided to live with my in-laws, my father-in-law renovated the two-family house out of his own pockets, and it's not easy to just move out. Besides, the problem is only my mother-in-law. Everyone else has a good relationship with me. Is waiting for this change of heart in my mother-in-law the only option? I continue to live with these worries day after day. On one particular day, my mother-in-law was going on a trip to the hot springs.
Hey, you! Come over here!
Yes?
Since I'm going on a trip, I assume you'll slack off in various ways, so I'll give you some work to do. Go clean the prefab in the yard now.
Right now?
Yes, no complaints.
Since there was no one around to harass me, I'm going to allow myself some freedom. And upon hearing that my mother-in-law was going on a hot springs trip, my daughter expressed a desire to go as well, so we had planned a family trip to the hot springs. We invited my father-in-law as well, but he said he'd stayed at home alone, so it was a long-awaited family vacation. With preparations to be made, I didn't have time to clean the prefab, but for now I just nodded. An hour later, my mother-in-law left the house, and later that afternoon, we set off. Without someone around to harass me, it's amazing how much more at ease I feel, I thought as I enjoyed a long overdue vacation. Then the next evening, to relieve my husband who was tired from the long drive, I went to pick up my mother-in-law from the station.
Oh, you're already out of the prefab? I thought since there's no one to help you, you'd be a mummy by now. But luck was on your side.
Wait a moment, what on earth is going on? Out of the prefab? I haven't been cleaning the prefab or anything, and right after my mother-in-law left, I went on a hot springs trip. I was just here to pick up my mother-in-law, and she smirked at me while saying that. What do you mean? I didn't have much time, so I didn't clean the prefab.
Huh? You don't need to make jokes like that. The inside of that prefab gets quite hot due to its structure, so I thought I'd tease you a bit and locked you inside. But someone must have let you out quickly, right? I hid the key in my room, but I left my room unlocked.
At that moment, I was taken aback and couldn't find the words. What was my mother-in-law talking about? I didn't clean the prefab at all. This was neither a joke nor anything of the sort. If my mother-in-law was joking, it would be fine, but if she was serious, something seriously wrong must have happened. She seemed to have mistaken that I was the one locked in the prefab, which was completely wrong. In that instant, my spine shivered and I became genuinely anxious. Wait a moment. You're not joking, are you? I didn't go into the prefab. This is the truth. After that, I left the house quickly since I didn't have much time.
If it wasn't you who I locked inside? It's true that when I locked the prefab, there was someone inside. I thought it was you since I had asked you to clean it.
Realizing this was getting serious, I immediately accelerated the car. Since we were on a hot springs trip as a family, we weren't at home. In that case, there are two possible scenarios. An intruder or burglar entered the prefab and my mother-in-law, misunderstanding the situation, locked it, or she mistook my father-in-law for me and locked him in. Either way, my mother-in-law had said for certain that there was someone inside the prefab, so there was no doubt that there was someone inside. Because we hurriedly drove the car, we reached home in about 10 minutes, and we quickly opened the door to the prefab. Jack, are you alright? Although I had mentally prepared myself, the person trapped inside the prefab was indeed not an intruder. It was my father-in-law. My father-in-law turned 70 this year and he had been complaining about his declining physical strength recently, so being left alone all night posed a significant danger. He had lost consciousness, so we immediately called an ambulance. This prefab had been built quite a while ago and was directly exposed to sunlight, so the interior became incredibly hot. Since it couldn't be used as a prefab anymore, it had become a storage shed. My father-in-law seemed to have come looking for something at a coincidental time. I momentarily thought that luck had turned against us, but it wasn't bad luck. It's because of this wretched, vile hag who thought of doing something this inhumane. This happened because of her twisted mind plotting to entrap me. Does she even realize how much danger her actions put someone's life in? I was truly infuriated, but fortunately my father-in-law was taken to the hospital by ambulance, received immediate care, and managed to regain consciousness. I'm sorry for causing trouble. It seems I had heat stroke and dehydration. Thank goodness. I'm really relieved. His life was saved, and assuming there were no lasting effects on his health, I felt genuinely relieved. My husband, who hadn't said a word so far, seemed considerably relieved, his eyes slightly teary. Of course, because one wrong move could have meant danger to his life. For the time being, knowing that my father-in-law was safe, our attention turned to my mother-in-law, who caused this situation, but since we couldn't yell at her in my father-in-law's presence, of course, we left the hospital room. Do you realize how dangerous your actions were? Cut the nonsense already! How could you think of that so lightly? It's not. I had no intention of plotting against him. The result of your attempt to plot against me led to this accident. Seeing my mother-in-law still trying to make excuses even at this point, I was infuriated to the core. Moreover, my father-in-law became a victim while she tried to set me up. That's probably why she's so shaken, but if I were the victim, would she have cared at all? Being trapped in a place like that all day, even someone younger like me would be in danger. Even an idiot would understand that much. First should come an apology, that's only natural, but my mother-in-law who can't even manage that. It made me want to punch her. Struggling to control myself, I held back and then my mother-in-law said something outrageous. He's probably worried too. Could you keep it a secret that I did this? I don't want to create unnecessary trouble. Huh? What are you saying? Do you not intend to apologize to him for what you've done? There are things in this world that he doesn't need to know. Thinking of this as an accident would be better for him too, right? What does she mean that it's better for him? She only thinks about herself and her own interests, yet she has the nerve to say that. However, I wasn't the only one who snapped upon hearing this. My husband's face rapidly transformed into a furious expression resembling that of a demon, and in the next moment he forcefully opened the door to the hospital room. Suddenly, I was startled and couldn't find my voice, but my father-in-law, who slowly raised his upper body from within the room, started speaking. I've heard everything just now. I never imagined it wasn't an accident. I had a feeling someone had locked the door, but to do it intentionally like that? Huh? Wait, you heard us? I was the one who opened the door. Well, it was only slightly open, but it was enough for Dad to hear the conversation. In order to show your true nature to Dad, I thought this would be the best way. I've been fed up with your mistreatment of my wife for a while now, but I never expected you would go this far, so I wanted Dad to understand it thoroughly. I never anticipated this, but it turns out my husband has slightly opened the door to the hospital room so my father-in-law could hear our argument. Therefore, our conversation from earlier, especially my mother-in-law's remarks to cover up her actions, had all been heard. At that moment, my mother-in-law's face turned pale and her momentum from before seemed to have vanished. She was completely speechless. Let's sort out the facts first. Why did you lock the door even though there was someone inside? Now that you've been caught red-handed, don't lie. I just thought of giving her a little punishment. You might not understand, but her cooking and housework... Lately, she's been quite careless. She's been getting a bit too carried away. Who's getting carried away here? Squandering other people's money, neglecting all household chores and meals? Putting your own actions aside, you dare to criticize others? To me, you're far more despicable. My usually calm father-in-law was raising his voice at my mother-in-law in anger. I had never seen this side of him before, and I was quite surprised, but above all, it was my mother-in-law who was the most shocked. However, what my father-in-law was saying was completely accurate. I'm the one who usually takes care of housework and meals, and we had decided on having our own separate living spaces in our two-family house, but I'm the one who looks after both our living spaces. I had been thinking that there was no choice because my mother-in-law kept imposing herself on me, but upon closer reflection, there's really no need for me to do that. Besides, my mother-in-law's spending habits are on a completely different level. Even for this recent hot springs trip, she went using my father-in-law's money. I don't plan to complain about it or anything, but if she's just playing around with other people's money without doing anything, it's a bit hypocritical for her to criticize me. I feel sorry for everything. Well then, how about you kneel down and apologize to her right now? Huh? If you genuinely feel sorry from the bottom of your heart, can't you do something like that? Of course, under these circumstances, my mother-in-law would absolutely never want to kneel down to me. But considering her position, she can't exactly refuse, and I don't know what would happen if we made my father-in-law even angrier. There seemed to be a moment of hesitation, but my mother-in-law reluctantly lowered her head toward me. She had always looked down on me and bullied me incessantly, but now she was kneeling before me. She deserves it. The suffering and anger she's feeling right now are the same as what I've been feeling all along. Alright then, we're getting divorced. Huh? I shouldn't have to explain that I don't need you anymore. I can't live with someone who has no regard for human life. There's no way I can continue living with you. Don't ask back what's obvious.
I've already kneeled down and apologized as you said, so why?
I never thought my father-in-law would declare a divorce, so I was a bit surprised, but I was truly furious at my mother-in-law's reaction. She's done all this up until now, including what happened this time. If she thinks that a single apology can make everything right, her brain must be rotten. If she thinks she can get away with not taking responsibility for her actions and just apologizing, she's seriously mistaken.
I've already apologized properly. Why don't you say something too?
Huh? Should I report this to the police then?
Huh?
What you did is a crime. Do you think society would overlook it? If simply kneeling down would make everything forgiven, then I'll do the same to you and kneel down. How about that? Unable to come up with a response to my words, my mother-in-law just bowed her head in defeat. She must have realized there was nothing she could do. But it's her own fault that it's come to this. She was just one step away from doing something irreversible to my father-in-law, and yet she's the one who gets off with just a divorce. I thought she should be grateful to be let off this easily. I wish she'd just suffer for the rest of her life. But just as I was thinking that, my husband, who had been silent until now, voiced his complaints. Hey, I think you know by now, but you need to leave right away. We won't let you continue living at our home anymore. And if you divorce Dad, you'll become a complete stranger. So, bring the divorce papers from the city office immediately and sign them here. That's right, do that for us.
Wait a moment. Don't just take matters into your own hands like that. Divorce? I'm not convinced yet.
Your approval isn't necessary, and if you don't agree to the divorce, I'll take you to court anytime, you know? My father-in-law forcefully declared, and my mother-in-law finally seemed to give in, collapsing to her knees and beginning to cry. What's with her acting like the victim? In reality, my father-in-law is the one who suffered, and you're the culprit, aren't you? Even until this final moment, my anger towards my mother-in-law's actions was almost unbearable, but I was able to vent my pent-up frustration, so I felt a bit relieved. With this, I can say goodbye to my mother-in-law, and I feel a bit lighter knowing I can sever ties with her. Right after that, my father-in-law and mother-in-law signed the divorce papers my husband had prepared, and the two of them successfully divorced. Of course, the house was in my father-in-law's name, and there was hardly any property to divide. This was mainly because we used a significant portion of our savings during past renovations for the two-family house. Additionally, if my father-in-law were to claim compensation from my mother-in-law following this incident, the amount would be enormous. That's why when they divorced, we agreed on a no-asset division arrangement. However, my father-in-law's revenge didn't end here. Divorce alone meant losing the house, money, and almost everything essential in life. For my mother-in-law, this was a considerable blow, but it seemed my father-in-law wasn't planning to let it end there. Once the divorce was finalized, my father-in-law contacted the police immediately. He used a recorded conversation from the hospital, which my husband had been recording in secret as evidence. As a result, my mother-in-law was promptly arrested for false imprisonment. This undoubtedly shocked my mother-in-law, but the fact remained that she had committed a crime. It couldn't be overlooked, and it seemed they weren't planning to let a criminal go unpunished. It seems she managed to avoid going to prison, but with this, she's officially become a criminal, and I couldn't care less about how she'll manage her life from now on. It's unrelated to me, but she's in for a tough life ahead. By the way, I'm still living happily in my in-laws' house with my husband, my father-in-law, and our adorable daughter.